think about dying?
Hey sis, welcome to the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Wagner, and while I'm tough as a mother, sometimes I know we're all out here, tired of needing to be one. Buckle up as we land the mothership and all things motherhood in the real world. Before we move on, I'd like to thank the incredible sponsors who saw an opportunity to support women in their day-to-day journeys by joining together to make this podcast a reality. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Pansition with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and Chica Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice. Well, this starts a fantastic episode of the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast. In fact, it is our last episode of season 1, and I could not think of a better way to bring this home than to have some of my favorites, my besties, some professional women, some troublemakers, good trouble that is, of women who are out here doing ridiculously amazing things. And so I often find myself on the phone with them, in a text message with them, in a coffee shop with them, and I just wish I could hit record. Like, we're sitting there and we're having these conversations that feel so life-changing and authentic and important. And I'm like, where's the record button? Like, how do we get more of this information to other women out there? So I thought this would be a fantastic way to end what would be the last episode of Mama Trauma Barbie. And so I am so honored and privileged to have 3 friends with me today. I have Miss Nadia Lewis, who all of you have met before. She helped me launch this podcast in episode 0, and she's the Vice President of Human Resources and the Center for Intercultural Excellence at Tiffin University. She sits on a million boards, she speaks regularly, and she knows what the hell she's doing as it relates to HR. And she's out here making some major waves, and I'm so excited to have her back to talk about some things that I think are way overdue. We also have Miss Jamie Heldt, founder of Curated Experience Consulting, a leading figure in healthcare accessibility, and drumroll, she just won a Top Innovator in Entrepreneurship Award, and I am ridiculously proud of her, as I am of my next guest, Miss Nancy Disbrow, who also won in the same category, the Top 100 Innovator in Entrepreneurship. And she is founder of Neurosity as a dyslexic maverick out here, pioneering the work for workplaces to help neurodiverse individuals celebrate their gifts by creating inclusive workplaces. And so I'm so excited to have them join us. And so I've asked each of them to come with a point or a topic that we've talked about over the past year as it relates to how do we move forward. And so I just want to welcome these women. I just want to get you introduced to them a bit before we get started. But ladies, welcome to the Mama Trauma Barbie podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So honored to be here again, and congratulations with everything.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, you are women that have spoke my name in rooms that I have not been in, and I love our circle. Like, it just clicks and works the way I think it can and should for more women out there. And so I want to talk through that today, but thank you to all 3 of you, right? You're doing ridiculously amazing things. Nancy and Jamie, you have just launched new businesses, as have I. You've been a big part of why mine is even getting off the ground. Nadia, you continue to speak my name in rooms that I'm not in, as well as it relates to just new contacts and people out there that I should need to get hooked up with. And not only that, like, we hold each other up, not only in a professional manner, but in a personal manner. And so we were actually bantering before we got started around, hey, I think the goal at this point isn't any of the extras. It's just, how do we keep these kids alive and how do we keep us alive? Like, is it really any more complicated than that at this moment?
Yes. Resuscitate. It's not the do not resuscitate. Resuscitate often and as needed. And is there rooms you're not in? Because I do think you're in all the rooms.
No,
honestly.
No, I'm really not. And I think that's a great way to start this episode off. Like, I am so humbled by needing to come home the past few years and be with my kid who was struggling with health issues. And it was lonely It sucked. It was hard. And as much as some of my friends wanted to be there for me, I mean, this was just a window that I had to be in and work through. But I think what has my attention is how many women are finding themselves in this window, and the way we're doing work, the way we're doing friendship, like the way we're doing everything out here, it's just not working. And so here's what has my attention and why I was so excited to have all of you with me today, because I haven't been in rooms. And so as a professional woman who dedicated half of her life to building her career, having the rug pulled out from under her, I see how we're leaving so many women behind, and the way we're networking, the way we're loving on each other, the way we're supporting each other. I don't know that it's working. So I want to talk about all of this and tweeze it out a little bit.
Alicia, I just think that we have been programmed to try to look like we are competent as women for so many generations now that you can't see the vulnerability because it shows weakness. We already know that men apply for promotions when they have 65% of the skills available, and women wait till we have 90%. We're afraid to ask for help because it might show vulnerability. We're afraid to show that we are struggling to maintain jobs, careers, families, marriages, all of the balance, because that might make us look like we don't have it together. And we've been told for so long now that we can have it all, that we should have it all together. God forbid somebody see our cracks, right? I think men are really good at saying no when they mean no. And I think we're not so good at it, right? Yeah. So I know a lot of men who I highly respect who would say, I'm not going to get up at 6 a.m. on Saturday to do that thing, that volunteer work, that family event, whatever it is, because I want to prioritize a project at home or a sports show that I want to watch. Whereas women will say, yep, I'll do it. And we get out there and we continue to go on and on and on. So some of this is our own fault for just not being as honest as we need to be, which is why I love all of you and the conversations we have, because it gets really honest. Yeah, so thank you for the forum and for other women who listen to this to be able to express what's actually going on out there.
Right. And that's,
I think we have to be honest
too, right? I mean, we're having these conversations of imposter syndrome right now. And even though it's applicable to both men and women, women are having to deal with this a lot more than men, right? Women are the ones that are feeling like they're not worthy or comfortable, or they have to code switch to be in a room, to be valued or seen in a certain light. And I think that's that continuity of us feeling like we have to appear and be somewhere that we're not. And we don't feel like that we fit in. And it's like you said, Jamie, it's that conversation of being all, programmed to think that, gosh, do we really belong there? Do we have to bear the weight of everything? We can't show our vulnerability. We have to be all and everything at all times.
Nancy, you were going to say something, sis.
So just in full transparency, it was only a few years ago that I was in the corporate world. I got my dream job. Literally, I'd worked for almost 20 years to get this vice president role that I thought I wanted. And I literally looked around and saw that if I continued down this path, it was going to end in another divorce for me. I had unfortunately already been through it, but I didn't want it again. And that most likely my kids were, at best, they weren't going to know who I was, but at worst, they wouldn't like me. Right? They wouldn't even care if I was around. And making that decision to step away from that position that I'd worked so hard for, it was hard, but it wasn't, right? Because I knew in my core exactly what I had to do. And I wish I didn't have to do it, right? I think it led me to a much better spot at the end of the day. But I looked around at these executive tables that I was sitting at, and either their spouses worked or they didn't. They all had help. They all had it took me years to figure out that people had house cleaners coming in, and I was cleaning my house every Saturday morning, to Jamie's point, by myself and trying to do it all because I thought that that's what was expected of me. And so I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I think it's so important that we start talking about, we look like we have it all together, but we have teams and armies behind us making this happen too. And that's okay. Like that makes us just as valuable and successful in the workplace as well.
I think the idea that everybody has an army behind them is also an interesting statement. And I'm glad you brought it up, Nancy, because while it looked from the outside in that I had an army behind me, you know, my family doesn't live here. One of my family members is going through cancer. You know, my in-laws don't live here. And my mother-in-law, you know, she helps where she can, and she does. But, you know, it's interesting. Like, I see other people around me, and I hope they realize how lucky they are, right? With dual grandparents, or just, you know, the accessibility with finances to be able to afford, you know, childcare or nannies. And it's like, that's another conversation in this. Like, that is also not created equal. And so it's really interesting as we talk about, you know, DEI, that we run everybody down the same lane. And again, I'm just so humbled by being like taken out, right? And just having to sit at home in this situation and being like, whoa, there is so much that is wrong here. Like, here's somebody that literally spent half their career to get somewhere that they thought they were going, didn't choose this. And then how do we help women get back out here? And I think it's naturally happening. Like you said, Nancy, right? You were in corporate, you got out. And so I think there's this huge, like, I'm imagining like two mountains across from each other, right? And there is this need for this bridge across it to help more women who are hands down finding themselves in situations like all of us on this phone. But we have everybody going down this like same lane. Like, no, there is no part-time employment being offered. There's no job share being offered. There's no healthcare benefits that are allowing more people to get treatment that they need. We have childcare that isn't covered, right? So again, we run into that. Or childcare for kids who are now really sick, that if they're neurodivergent, half of our childcare options that are out there, they're not an option for so many of these kids. So, you know, we keep looking at it and it's like, well, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to improve it? And so I know it really has my attention, and I know it's definitely, like I said, something I'm super excited to talk about on this call. But I mean, I know, Nadia, with you being out there in the HR world, like, please tell me some good news. Like, what's happening? What can we expect? Because it feels on LinkedIn right now, like it feels, the tension's always been on Twitter and Facebook, right? It? Yeah. It is so heavy on LinkedIn right now. And I'm like, okay, that's it. The world's going to hell. Like it's, you know, it's officially in LinkedIn. Not that we can't have hard conversations on LinkedIn. I'm saying it is exploding on LinkedIn. Like, women are losing their minds, and it's about time.
Yes. I think, you know what, there's some beautiful things happening though with that. And I think even though it's heavy on LinkedIn and even other social media platforms, there is a undertone of freedom and strength that's coming from that we are feeling free to express ourselves. And it may be venting from years of stifling, but it's happening, and it's generating conversations like this, where we're able to say, listen, I'm tired of being lonely. I'm tired of feeling like I'm on an island by myself. And here's my struggles. Here's what's going on. And I love the comments of women saying, I am with you. I'm here too. And I'm so glad you're having this conversation because I am aligned with what you're feeling. So even as heavy as it is, the first step is getting it out. And as you mentioned, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the women are 5 to 8 times more likely than men to have their employment affected by caregiver responsibilities. And this was reported by Women in Labor Markets in 2023. 5 to 8 times more likely. What that tells me in the workplace, well, first of all, post-pandemic, there are some things that did come out of there that were beneficial for women. It created that mindset for employers to know flexibility can happen. That traditional, antiquated mindset of working and grinding hard from 9 to 5 doesn't always have to mean that it equates to a good worker, right? You can work remote. You can have flexibility in your day. And coming out of there, you saw an increase of women being employed. You saw an increase of women being able to take jobs and diversify the gender roles a little bit in the employment sector because there was that opening of, well, gosh, we don't have to be so traditional in how we fill the role. With that, you created better sources of talent, more diverse way of thinking and being for employers. You start to see the benefits of it. Where we have more room to go, well, I mean, the conversations need to happen. We started those conversations, but it's that lack of really sitting down and saying, what allows you to be successful in your job? And letting go of this mindset, and I talked about this the other day, that I was raised where when you go to work, you clock in, you clock out. You don't make friends at work. You have this different persona. Again, we started this infusion of imposter syndrome even when we were young, right? So who I am at home cannot be the same person of how I show up at work. And so let's talk about mental health and emotional health when we're weighted with having these so many personas. I think of the Barbie movie and America Ferrera's speech about that. You have to be thin, but not too thin. There's all these different modalities that we have to have as women. And now it's, let's be authentic. Let's show up through the talks of, the conversations of diversity, of really allowing people to be genuinely who they want to be and not having this split personality anymore. So when you have that and you let go of this sense of clocking into work and not bringing yourself to work, let's bring yourself to work. And because you're bringing yourself to work, what do you need for us to support you? Because if you can authentically be here and be the person you want to be, we know that you're going to perform better. We know that innovation happens more naturally, and we know that we can retain you longer. Oh, and you'll be overall a healthier employee because you're not struggling with so many of these things. But what do we need to support you? What do we need to advocate for you in order for you to do that? And a lot of times it's through benefits, it's through policies and plans, and it's work environment, setting up the work environment and the culture to better support women in the workplace.
I think it reminds me of the issue that we're currently running into, though, right? Like if men would still choose divorce and they would still choose leaving their wife who has a cancer diagnosis, I'm finding the correlation then that these are the same individuals running companies who then they don't see these benefits as important, right? And so what are we going to do about it? And I think you said it. We have to authentically start showing up. You said earlier, we have to start having the conversation. So what does that look like? I get this a lot when I post about it, that people are like, well, you're privileged, right? You have that choice and other women may not. And I agree with that. But I think what we have to start saying as women is, okay, who is privileged and who can get the confidence that if they're being mistreated in their workplaces to be able to say something or leave and go somewhere that you can be appreciated. In the exit interview, be brave enough to share these things and what's going on. Because again, they're like, at this point, they're like, oh, okay, cool. They're just going to leave and great, I'll hire somebody different. But I don't think as women, I think the tension's there, but I saw another post on LinkedIn the other day, an argument about, right, the Barbie movie and the lack of nominations it got for their director and for Margot Robbie. But I mean, I couldn't believe people losing their mind that week and just the amount of women that were all over each other. And I'm like, cool. These guys are probably scrolling, looking at all this, and then turning around and going and make millions of dollars. And we're bitching about the right kind of feminism. And I get it. I mean, we do need to get organized. But there was a woman who did a response to a post, and she's like, the person who did the post said, hey, we all just need to get in the car and go. And this woman replied, and she said, where are we going? And I cannot stop thinking about that. And it just always brings me back then to, well, if these are the people running the companies and we're not getting what we want, and that's true, right? Like that, let's just name that is true. Then what are we going to do? And I think we can't do anything because we don't know where we're going, but then it's the wrong color of the car. Oh, she's in it, so I can't go. Like, there's so much going on for women right now that, again, it's just guys go back to what they're doing. And it's not that it's right, but they're organized around what they're doing and it works for them. And so I think as women, we have to get organized around what do we want and where are we going? Life happens. You can't predict the unexpected, but you can prepare. Your Edward Jones financial advisor, Jennifer Panzician, can help you with your financial goals, planning with life's ups and downs in mind. Call 419-841-2627 to get started. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Yeah, I think Jamie said it best, is that we need to be better and more in instilling confidence in our own voices and having that voice and utilizing that voice, being brave and emboldened enough to say what we want. And that's something I still don't see often enough. I applaud and encourage the women in the workplace to be able to do it, because that's only when change happens. And listen, I get having a destination and knowing where you're going in that car. But like for me right now, I don't have a destination, to be honest. My kids are 9 and 12. And so I am just enjoying the journey. I want to make sure I'm supported in that journey. I like who I'm journeying with, who's in the car ride with me. And I just want peace and to feel valued and to feel accepted. And that's okay right now where I'm at. Maybe 5 years later, I might have a destination spot, but right now it's about the journey. And it's okay to say, this is what I need in this phase of this car ride.
Alicia, I think we're on the right road, actually. It took a long time for Americans and decision makers to get behind preventative health care. And now we're talking about preventative employment loss, right? So when people like Nancy are leaving the corporate world because you don't know how to do it all. I had the same experience. I walked away from a corporate job a year and a half ago, very similar situation. And when that's happening and those voices are being heard, when women in leadership are saying, hey, this isn't working, and we actually are going to go ahead and exit because it's too overwhelming to try to figure it all out. I think we're getting there where decision makers, regardless of gender, are starting to feel economic pressure to leadership leaving. And that will eventually change, because when we're able to create more flexible work environments, which, as Nadia pointed out, did happen a bit through COVID in some very positive ways, when we're able to recognize that all different types of people bring value to the table, and we can be our authentic selves at work and lean into our God-given talents instead of trying to be all things to all people, there are economic factors to that. There are economic factors to the health and well-being of your employees. There are economic factors to turnover. And so that is maybe what it takes to get on the radar of some of these decision makers. Unfortunately, the softer side of the conversation is a very slow one, but there's real tangible results happening when these issues are not getting addressed. And when you've got good leadership, they're going to look at that trajectory and they're going to start treating it eventually like preventative health care, in my opinion, or hope at any rate.
Yeah, we have 3 people, even out of 4 on this call, who have decided to exit stage right and start their own businesses for the reasons that we're talking about, right? And Nadia, you being in HR, thank God, still where you're at, out here speaking and talking about some of the changes that Jamie's talking about, because I mean, I hear more and more women who are wanting to leave corporate because of the things that we're talking about. So it is an interesting dynamic. And again, that could swing one of 2 ways, right? Like if more women are leaving the workforce, what does that look like? And to your point, Jamie, what are the economic repercussions because of that? Or, right, does corporate continue to get worse because more men are going to be the ones plowing through there? And a lot of women, it takes a lot of work on the front end. And that's why I've been so grateful for our group. We've all been here to support each other and help each other and get through that. But I think we need to remind more women listening that, like, look, if you're running a business, I mean, we don't need to take even 10 seconds to go through that. It is hard. You are doing so much out of the gate yourself. And to be there for your friends who are doing that that is one of the biggest things you can do to improve the women movement moving forward, is help friends who are starting businesses or acquaintances who are starting businesses and inch them forward, because we need to be right beside corporate in all of this, with more women in these businesses, bringing more employees on themselves so these companies can grow.
Right. But do we think some of the problem is because, there's still a lot of men leading organizations? And if I reflect back on some of the places I've worked and the leadership, I received more empathy and sympathy for things, especially when my kids were little, and needing to step away and having that last minute call from preschool that they were sick and needed to come pick them up. I found more empathy and flexibility, and I was empowered more to be authentically who I am with women leaders, because I knew they got it, right? And they were in turn vulnerable and shared some of the things that they were struggling with. So you had this whole, back and forth of support within the workplace. And I wonder, if that's why we still have women leaving organizations, is because there's still the lack of women leadership at the very top.
100%.
So I had almost a different experience, and I wish I would have had Nadia's experience. So I found women leaders and who were kind of that notch above me, that were my mentors or those guiding posts growing in my career, that were almost tougher on me than the men that I worked with. Were more sympathetic, and they at least understood that they had wives at home to help go get those calls and things like that. Then the women had more of and Alicia, it kind of goes back to your Claire Coder. She mentioned this, I think, on your podcast too, of the women are like, I did it. I got there by myself. You can too. And I'm going to make it as hard for you, and I'm not going to help you. And that's why I appreciate so much about the four of you. And everybody's journey may look different, but we can support each other to that destination. Even if it's not the same destination, we're still moving forward. And I think we have to just kind of gut check sometimes ourselves of, are we helping other women do that? And I think I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But there are so many people that are like, I fought through it, and I'm going to make sure that you do too. And that hurts my heart, because there are so many people that want to take that leap, and those little voices around them are holding them back.
Women experience.
Sorry.
What's that, Jamie? What's that?
Not a sisterhood mentality.
Yeah. Women experience PTSD 3 to 4 times the rate that men do. And so it's interesting you bring this up, Nancy, because I think so much of that, of course, it sneaks into our homes, but it sneaks into the workplaces. And so women who have had PTSD from their work experiences, and I bet if we were to stop and go around with each and every single one of us, we have at least one, if not 50 stories. But, we unfortunately, if you haven't processed what's going on in your life and you bring it into everything and everyone around you, then your example is exactly what starts to happen. And I think what's more sad, and something that has my attention and something I was on the fence about bringing up during our podcast, is, social media right now, like it's a love-hate relationship anyways, but I just see women being so nasty towards each other on social media right now. And Nancy, it really goes to what you're talking about. And it's like, people who are complaining about stuff, and we can't get at the table, or in this case, a comment, right? And properly dialogue with each other around what our opinions are. And again, if you're just being an asshole, then check out, peace out. But it's just this low grade, wanting to continue to argue versus come up with solutions mentality. And everybody just feels like they have to be right. I mean, listen, as somebody who is literally today launching their new company and business around healthcare, even where I was a year ago to where I am now, I think I have morphed myself and this company 3 different times based on new data and information that has come up. And it continues to humble me because it makes me understand if I'm not paying attention, then I'm missing so much out here and we're not going to be able to help people. But I think that goes to Nadia, like you said, the workplace, or, you know, Jamie, like you said, our economy, or Nancy, like you said, our relationships with each other. And so again, I've said it almost every podcast, but when we put stuff on autopilot, we're going to crash if we're not paying attention. And I think we're there right now with women in relationship with women, because you're right, Nancy, we are right at the line of our moms who really were in the workforce to now, right? A lot of women are in the workforce and we haven't been here before, and we're pioneering, and there are no rules for this, and we're creating the playbook, and women just keep throwing it back and forth at each other. You're not right. This is wrong.
We're still assigning judgment and labels, right? Whether we mean to or not. That unconscious bias that Nadia's taught us about happens with women too, where it's like, oh, must be nice, they get to stay home with their kids. Oh, must be nice, they got a promotion. Oh, must be nice, they have a glamorous job where they get to travel. We do a lot of this, oh, must be nice. And you know what? If everybody was just a little more honest and vulnerable about what it takes to get there, it's not so nice. I recently had somebody make a comment to me, which I thought was interesting. They said, I would love to know how you did it. You know, you had 5 children and you balanced this big corporate career. How did you do? Like, how did you build your career during that stage of life? And I had to pause and think, I didn't build it. I only said yes to things where I could be a mom. I never had direction. I didn't know where I was going in that car. I had no idea. I got in the car that was taking me to the spot where I could still pick up my kids from school every day and volunteer at school and be a scout leader and go to church and do all the things, right? I never had direction. And I think that's interesting too. This whole must be nice to show up wherever you do because you said yes to the things that worked for life. And that's something else that I don't think anybody's ever talking about. I had a wonderful female president of the most recent company I worked for. And she said to me one day, here's what I expect on you. I expect your best every day. Some days you're going to nail it. Some days you're going to be out there making deals happen and influencing people. And you're going to be representing our company at the Heldt. And it's just going to be awesome. And other days you're going to have a sick kid at home, or you're not going to be feeling so great, or you're going to be caring for a parent, or you're going to have a flood in your basement, whatever that looks like. And I expect your best from you that day. And that's going to look different every day. And I absolutely love those words.
I love that you got them. And I think it goes the other way too, right, Jamie? Like more people when they're in interviews, while she had expectations and she was very clear about them with you, I'm noticing more women even when they're in those situations in the very front. It's like, well, it's almost like marriage. Well, I'll hope some things get better here. Like, no, like, you know, figure out up front, like what your non-negotiables are and communicate them. But I mean, even already, like this is a theme, like we said at the beginning, and Jamie, you nailed it, quite frankly, with what the theme is, I think, for the solution to a lot of this is confidence. Like we have to have confidence in ourselves that we know what our needs are. And I think, unfortunately, as women, we have sacrificed so many of our needs for marriage, for kids, for our workplaces, for our businesses, that we have to just stop and slow down and take inventory here and be like, what are my needs? I mean, when I did life and business coaching.
Well, here's the thing. I wonder, and going back to where, you know, Nancy brought up, sometimes women, we are harshest and unapologetically not so kind to other women, right? And I wonder if that starts with the conversation with ourselves, how we project that, right? Because if I'm projecting lack of compassion and empathy to you, very well, I'm doing that for myself. If there's an expectation or my thought is, wow, how did you get that? Why are you deserving of that? That's the conversation I'm also having with myself. Maybe I don't feel I'm deserving of things. Maybe I question whether I can get those things. And so your conversation is the relationship. And it's not just with others. It also starts with a conversation you have with yourself. What are you telling yourself? What's the conversation you're having with yourself? Are you saying you got this? You're deserving. You're worthy of good things in your life. Because if that's what you're telling yourself, you're going to want that for others. And I think that's probably part of that massaging that we need to have with women. What's the conversation we're having with ourselves first in order to uplift and inspire other women around us?
I love that, Nadia.
Yeah. And well, what do you love about it? I'd love to hear, Nancy. Because I think it's really important.
Yeah. So I think it starts with ourselves. It always starts with ourselves. It's so easy to project onto others, right? And yet it's that mirror that if we hold it up, we're like, ooh, what am I feeling first? And I think the first part of that is just identifying it of, okay, that doesn't feel right. And kind of back to those brave conversations too, Alicia, of this is going to be tough, right? This feels abnormal and uncomfortable, and I'm going to stay here. Like, I am here for the uncomfortableness to process my internal feelings or this external conversation that I don't agree with. And I think that that's the first part of this kind of almost healing journey that we go on, is we have to start with ourselves. And I'm so lucky that I have this kind of network of you ladies and a few others that you'll gut check me. And even yesterday, I had a big presentation with Alicia, and I was like, I don't know if I can do it. And she's like, you were born for this. Do it. And it was just sometimes, but I was aware enough to know, right? Like, I didn't get in my own head long enough to self-sabotage. I reached out to the right network, and I got the support, and I was off and running. But so often, I think sometimes we don't even have those networks too, which is hard. But we have to be really intentional about creating them. I could be 5 years from now and still not have this network if I hadn't, responded to Alicia's LinkedIn message and started a conversation, right? So we owe it to ourselves to start that process internally.
And some of us have been burned along the way, right? I know I have. And so that invitation is there too, that it's like, okay, right? Circling back around in my 40s, I had, same Nancy, I have a handful over here, but what I have so enjoyed lately is at this level of taking inventory, recalibrating. I have this entire new network of women that I can't imagine not having as part of this journey. But it really took me getting clear on, again, who am I? Because as women, we change our bodies. Like, we're changing in our 20s. We're literally changing our names when we get married. A lot of people do. I mean, and that's hard. I mean, that could be a whole podcast, seriously, in itself, like with just women and that identity of who we were allowed to be and that freedom that we had that our mothers didn't. And I see so many women, like, Nancy, you kind of said it at the beginning of the podcast too, right? With like hyphenating your name. But again, whole nother podcast. But our names change. And then if you have kids, your bodies change. And then, my God, the minute they come out of you change at a level that you didn't even know was possible. And then from there, it just continues because they grow and they develop, and then our needs change and their needs change. And it's just constant. And I try to, with John a lot, like, it's just different. And it's hard because there's two different experiences happening in our home, and trying to morph those into this marriage and into this life and into this existence. And it's just, he experiences a different life every day than I do. And it's trying to get both of us on the same page. But I think it's the same thing. We're mirroring that for our friendships, and we're trying to do that. I think you said, Nadia, in these relationships that we have. And then we're trying to do the same thing at home. And here we have these workplaces and this economy that we're trying to inform in between. And it really is the same problem. It's just everybody getting really clear on what they want and need. And there's oftentimes some healing that needs to happen in order for that to happen.
I think it comes down to, what would you tell a friend, right? What would you tell a friend? If one of you called me and said, I've got this issue, I want to talk to upper management about it, or the CEO or whomever, what would you tell your friend how to advocate for themselves? And I think that's what women need, Nadia, is the ability to talk to yourself in that same way. I can't tell you how many times in corporate America I was told I had a lot of boundaries or high standards. Mm-hmm. And that's code. That's code for you're being a pain in my ass, right? Yeah, because you're asking for too much. That is code. And I'm a persuasive person, so I usually got there, but not without really self-advocating for myself. And sometimes that meant the seat at the table, right, with the big boys to make those decisions that were going to influence all the other people around me. But I think we have to get back to that self-reflection. I really appreciate what you said, because I think telling ourselves the same messaging we would give a friend on how to self-advocate is the key. And listen, the thing about you guys is you're not complainers. That's why I love this group. You're thinkers and you're doers, and that's hard. So that's the other piece, right? Is take action. Don't sit around and complain about what's happening or think about solutions. Figure out ways to get in there. Nadia, Nancy, what you guys are doing to bring different voices to the employment table, to help people recognize how much we improve and grow and how creativity lives when we get all the right voices around the table. That's incredible. It's going to change a generation. Alicia, you and I taking on healthcare, making sure people have equal access to healthcare, it's only the biggest problem in America. I'm sure we can solve it, probably on this podcast, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. These are doers. And so that's the other thing that I think you've got to get out of our own heads and figure out how to take action as women.
Well, and
that's how she
I love this. Jamie, thank you so much for bringing this up. And so let's be honest with people too. The way that looked and how I did it the past 5 years is so different. Like, I've been intentional with taking my inventory. Like, I'm in a season right now where I'm building something that a lot of families like mine need, but I still have a family and a daughter at times who's experiencing challenges. And so what's been difficult for me as I calibrate is, it feels at times like I'm out here building this unbelievably needed new system, and it operates at a part-time structure. And so that's difficult. I have to give myself all the grace in the world. I'm constantly giving myself Rocky smacks or calling one of you to give me one if I don't even have the energy to give myself one. And so I think we have to be honest about that, because I don't think we've done a very good job of women who lead companies or women who are starting companies, or quite frankly, even women that stay home. One is not better than the other. And Jamie, again, you said it at the beginning, we just have to be vulnerable. And so, you hear all the time like, oh, they're doing cool stuff. And it's like, let me tell you what's behind that conversation, or let me tell you the invitation into imposter syndrome that comes with that on the regular. I constantly have people needing something from me. And Jamie, I do what you do. I set hard boundaries. I'm like, listen, I'm going to have that to you in 3 days, not 24 hours. I will have it to you in 3 days. Or I say no to a lot of stuff. And so I just think we have to be honest, and maybe each of you could go around and also like the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I think this is why women don't stay at the top. It feels hard. They feel exposed. They feel like it's not good enough. And it's like, no, it's actually really messy. And we need to start being vulnerable about what comes with this. My God, I didn't wash my hair this morning before this podcast because like the morning fell apart, and, I barely have any makeup on, and I'm just laughing because it's like dry shampoo legit gets to be good enough this morning for this podcast. Okay. And so I think, we just don't talk about some of that stuff enough, that it's like, this is not easy. And if we want more doers, we need to let them know that like, we're not doing it all and it ain't going perfect out here.
Yeah. I think that needs to be the catchphrase of 2024. Like,
what's that?
Feeling, it's a dry shampoo kind of day, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am here. Let's not ask any questions, but I am here. You know what? I'm still struggling with saying no to things. I am trying to be, I'm a rehab people pleaser. So I'm in rehab with it. I'm trying to be better at setting those boundaries and saying no, and being okay with protecting my emotional and mental health well-being, of learning I don't have to be all things to everyone still, even though I encourage it of everyone. I know what I should be doing. I tell people this, but I am admittedly bad myself, but working on it every day. Work in progress. Under construction is my sign.
What's a way you're working on it? Like, I love leaving people with tangible things, right? Like, what's one thing that you're working on to improve that?
one thing I'm working on, the first step that I do when I'm asked for something is, how do I get meaning and purpose from this? And if it's at the bottom of that list, then it needs to be not I'm going to break my back and sweat to get this accomplished, right? But if I do get some meaning and purpose from what this is being asked of me, then let's try to make that work, right? And so, of course, anything with my kids, right? I do get meaning from that. If they're happy, I'm happy, and that serves the greater good in so many ways. If it's work related, again, where do I find meaning in my job? And those are the priorities. Those are the things I need to be okay with saying yes to, but then be okay with saying no, because I don't really find purpose in this moment, in this hour. And so that's the first thing I do try to put a lens of understanding on is, at the end of the day, let's say it was stressful for me in that moment, I'm going to find gratification for it at the end of the day. And that needs to be the priority.
Good stuff, sis. I love that. What do you think, Jamie? What about for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I've had a couple of people and voices in my life that have helped me to identify this philosophy. I was never a great delegator, but I've gotten better at it. So the lens that I look through is, do I need to personally touch this, or can I solve it through delegation? So like all of you, I get asked to be on lots of boards, and I've picked a couple charity of choices that I'm really dedicated to. That allows me to be better at that and more focused. So when I get those asks, what I'll do is I'll try to find somebody who would fill that spot for them. To your point, Nadia, if it's not something really personally endearing, maybe it doesn't need to be me because it's just my time or my network that they want. So I'll lend that. I had a friend tell me once, and this was really good advice when my career was cranking up and she was in a similar situation. She said, you don't need to clean your house, Nancy. You don't need to buy your own groceries. Your family, that doesn't matter. What matters to them is that you are the one. I'm very proud of the fact that none of our kids have ever rode a bus. It's kind of a silly thing, but we've always picked them up from school and take them to school every day of their lives. And that's precious time to me. Now they all drive, so those days are over. But as of about a week ago, we're free.
Can you come help me take my
I'd love to have that car time with them. But that was important, right? It was more important that I cooked dinner with them or that I drove them to school than that I procured those groceries, for example. So thinking about this, is the same friend who told me about 1 minute management. She said, you can solve things in 1 minute on Amazon typically, rather than getting really frustrated that your child lost their 6th lunchbox that week or whatever it is. Just pick your battles. So delegation has been a really important part of learning to say yes to the best things and not have to say yes to everything.
It's so interesting you brought that up, because when I interviewed, and again, I traveled, I got better and better each step of the way. And so when I interviewed where I was at now, I was shocking to myself that I did set those expectations of what I needed to be able to be the best person they needed. And one of the things I said, just kind of smiling, as you said, you were fortunate enough to be able to drop your kids off to school and pick them up. That was one of mine. I said, I need to be able to drop my kids off to school because they're my cheer squad. They're what pumps me up to be who I am when I show up to work and be all the things you need. And so if I don't have that, it may be a dry shampoo kind of work day for me. So let me drop them off. I need that because they put smiles on my faces. I need to know they're okay, and then I'm okay. And so that reminds me of that conversation. They said, yes, we can make that work. So I show up usually closer to 9, but I am a happy person at 9.
I loved that for you too, because that's when we had our best conversations. When you had your 45-minute work commute, drop the kids, I knew exactly what time to call you. Yes. It served me well as well that you were doing that.
For me, it's more internal. So my struggles are like literally up in my own head. So Alicia, back to your point, I've started within the last year of sleeping on things. So my father is full of great wisdom. I'm lucky enough to talk to him almost every single day. And he's always like, everything's better after a good night's sleep. And I cannot tell you that that's ever not been true, right? Like it's always a little bit better, even in bad situations after a good night's sleep. And so I sleep on things before I say yes, because it's just that and part of it is my differently wired brain, right? Like I'm full ADHD, and so I say yes to everything and get super excited, even when it doesn't serve me and my family or my business. So sleeping on it's one, and then I have a someday list. So someday I would love to do a podcast just like this, right? Like someday I will do all these great things, but right now what my family needs or what my business needs are X, Y, and Z. And so it helps me not give up on these like future bigger like life things, but also stay true to what's important today. Because Jamie, I'm looking at you and my days are numbered with my kids not driving, right? Like I have a 15 and a 14 and a half year old. So they are practicing in the driveway, like they're doing all the things. And I know those days are numbered. So I want to hold on to those and still grow a business. I love what I do. I love working. There are Saturdays and Sundays where I would love to be in the office. I mean, truly, not that I don't love my kids, but I don't think people say that enough either, is that I love what I do. I could do it 70 hours a week and be a super happy person too. But there will be a season for that. And that now is not that time. And to be honest, I don't think I was there 5 years ago, because I was in a different world and I had different people that I was looking up to, and that wasn't the priority. And so I'm really grateful that I have, again, women like you. I know I sound like a broken record, but to kind of hold that mirror up and say, Nancy, this is an important time in their lives too. And don't miss it, because you can't get it back.
Ruth? You really boiled this down to, I think, remember how I said earlier, the post about getting in the car and then somebody's like, where are we going? I think we have someday and today lanes. Like that just like came into my mind. Those are kind of the two tracks that are starting to get laid, and I haven't been able to name them before. And I see a lot of women that are in that, and that's what's trying to change in our workplaces and even at home, right? Like there's all of these things, and there's this pace, and there's someday and there's today. And maybe that's how I'll frame it in my mind moving forward. Like there are some women doing some really ridiculously amazing things right now today, and they need our support. I have decided that some of my stuff I'm working on now is present today, and some of it, same thing, Nancy, it will be someday. And I think that's that we have to get clear on, or otherwise our nervous systems are just hijacked. And we're constantly on, which then I love your dad's advice that's why we should sleep on some things. But then Nadia, goes back to what you were saying. It comes back to us, right? It comes back to us, and we have to know what are our needs. And then again, Jamie, like that confidence around owning what our needs are. But I love that someday versus today. And I think that's what companies need to understand as well, right? What, this 9 a.m. to 3, like seriously, the educational system and the workplace just legit getting lined up around that right now would make the most profound difference. And then you hear things, because then here's the argument, right? Well, that doesn't work for my industry. And it's like, cool, maybe it doesn't, but that shouldn't stop the rest of the 80% of the companies who could be doing it right now. And then we'll figure out ways with the other 20% on what does work. And then same with the educational system, right? Like they've been doing it the same way for so long. So are there schools that start earlier? Are there some that start later? Like they're all sitting here fighting for students too. And it's like, get innovative and come up with some different solutions that would work for more parents, which 75% of employers are caregivers. Like we have all the puzzle pieces out here. It's just people being brave and courageous and asking for what they need and being non-negotiable on it. But that really helped me, Nancy, hearing you say someday and today, and those really being kind of the two lanes that we're going down. It's so funny, Jamie, how you said like being able to delegate and having expectations for yourselves and having them aligned. I think there's those external ones. And then Nancy, you just said it, there's those internal ones. Like, God bless my mother-in-law. She's literally a saint, one of my favorite people on the earth. However, she was over the other day and my kids did not have coats on. And I know we've heard this before, right? But she's like, where are their coats? And I'm like, listen, I have 800 other hills to die on. I am not dying on this one. If you would like their coats on, you are welcome. Like, go, like, they're hanging up. They are hanging up. But like with my neurodivergent daughter and like how many struggles her and I already, like, the invitation is there daily. I continue to just drop more and more every day. So it was so fun, Jamie, even in that moment with her, like, throwing that out. I think as women, we run into this every day because it's us that it's being talked to. And it's not just at work. It's with our family. It's with friends. It's with society, that there's those little moments, those where's the coat moment. And we have to also get comfortable with ourselves and be confident enough to be like, it's hanging up. So I don't know what that looks like for other women listening and what the coat conversation might look like for you, but like, let go of some of that. Like, you, again, our nervous systems are constantly on, and we have to realize that not every hill is for us. And like, I want to start sledding down some, not being stuck on them. You know what I mean?
I love to joke that my only goal with raising kids is, well, one, to keep them alive and just not raise assholes. Like, literally, at the end of the day, if they're alive and not assholes when they're 18 and 22 years old,
huge
the
win.
rest will work itself out.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. That's my goal. Coat or not, shoes or not, right? Like, it doesn't, those things don't matter in life, but them helping out a friend or being there when their friends are great, something big, those are the people, that's the next generation we need in the workplace and just in life.
Do you know what our kids need more than anything? The exact stuff that we're sitting here talking about. Our kids just want to be seen and heard, just like we want to be seen and heard with each other in our friendships, just like we want to be seen and heard from our bosses, our colleagues. And so when I get really overwhelmed with parenting, I think we just forget, like, we were all raised likely very similarly in this very militant, structured, right? And don't get me wrong, kids really need structure, but it's just, you guys know what I'm saying. It was this line file down on how we were going to do this. And I think we get caught in it. But at the end of the day, like, these kids, you know, they just want to be seen and heard. And so, like, even Jack last night, I was working on something and he was coming over and talking to me, and I felt my blood pressure really quick, right? Because I'm on a time crunch and blah, blah, blah. And I just said to myself, I'm like, he hasn't seen you all day. He's my talker. He just wants to talk to me. But like, when I really need to talk to someone, right? Like, Nancy, how you reached out yesterday, it was like, I'm creating so much space and time for everybody else around me that, you know, my kids today need their mom. And I'm not gonna feel bad about that. And I think more of us, I think maybe that's what we're all really trying to say out loud, especially again to men who run 80% of these companies, is that I am important, my kids are important, and my family's important. And we're really just trying to pave new ways around how to make all of that work, because it really does come down to, that's how this world changes and how our economy gets better. And I think that's wild to me, Jamie. I've heard you bring that up. Like, I cannot understand why these guys cannot correlate dollars with what it is that we're talking about. And it just blows my mind that it's like, this would literally be one of the greatest investments out there. I mean, we have a talent gap, right? We are trying to make our dollars stretch. And it's like, here's the investment. Invest in women, invest in families, and watch your companies grow.
Yeah. There's undeniable proof that when we feel better mentally and we're not stressed out, we're more productive. You are absolutely going to get the best out of any woman when she's feeling good about how things are running at her home, you know, in her relationships, etc. We're completely distracted when everything else is happening. So I think we're getting there. Nadia might be able to shed more light on that if those things are being heard. But I think that the conversations are happening, and certainly in the consulting work that I do, we're having those conversations with CEOs and CFOs about the tangible pieces that economically affect their company and help them to grow and do better, that feel a little bit soft. But I don't know, Nadia, what do statistics say? Are we making progress?
I mean, we are. Not enough, though. I mean, seriously, not enough. And especially when they look at the statistics of women by ages of the kids too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's available, because our needs, I think we kind of always hit this benchmark along the way of our conversation. We're basically seasonal in our lives, right? We change and need different things at different points. And so there is a tracking that did it based on ages of our kids. If you are one that have kids and even ones without. And for what women need with kids under 5 versus kids that were 5 to 10 and older, it's completely different. And so that's why we have to continue having the conversation. One of the things I do like to do when we do engagement surveys or even a honeymoon survey, which is what we do within the first 90 to 6 months of an employee's time frame, is what allows you to be successful here and what are some of the things we can do to support you. And it's different. You have to ask it continuously, not just when they first get there, which is what a lot of employers do. It's then market and say, let's check back in 2 years from now. Let's check back in another 3 years from now, because it will change all the time. We just need to be more consistent with having the conversations and having those relationships with our employees, the women in the workplace, knowing that it changes.
It would be so interesting to overlay research around what we know about women moving from ambition to purpose in their 30s and their 40s to demographically when they're having children and how that aligns with their needs. Are we striking the mark? Or are we way off because women are prolonging having children because naturally we're inclined towards ambition in our 30s. And then as we enter our mid 40s, or for those of us in the next decade now, even later, you're starting to worry more about things like your health and your spirituality and that holistic side of life. It'd be so interesting to see if we're even aligning needs like we think we are with where women are in their phases of life.
Yes. And there is
it's interesting because...
Oh, no, I was going to say,
go ahead.
There was a report that also added in being concerned about wills and having that conversation needed for a benefit structure within a workplace, and caregivers for parents, right? Because now we're in that phase of things. Even though the kids may be out the house, now you're a caregiver for your parents or your in-laws.
We really need to get employee assistance programs out of the shadows. They're hiding beneath life insurance plans and nobody knows how to access them. That's part of this conversation. We need to be highlighting for employers all of the benefits of a good EAP program.
Yes.
I would love to hear from each of you. Nadia, you kind of went into it, but let's name it. I would love for each of you to go through your respective fields. HR, obviously, Nadia, Jamie, healthcare, Nancy, our dyslexic maverick, right, with being able to bring neurodiversity training to a lot of these organizations. And that's a topic we need to hit on. But, I'm sitting here listening to all of you. And what's really coming up for me in this moment is just like women don't want to be vulnerable so that they don't look weak. I think this is moving, and the tension is also there for men, that this is natural to us. Like, this is so natural, this nurturing, recalibrating, building systems thing, right? We do it every day as moms and within our families. And so, my ask would be for any men listening or for the women listening. I think a lot of times for men, and I see it even with John, and he's admitted before, he's like, I don't know how to do that. And so I think that's also happening for men. Women, like, we could do this in our sleep, and I think they assume that they should be able to as well. And so to me, it's the power of teams. It's the power of why we need more women at the top, but it also could be why more women need to be coming alongside. I think we fight too much as women, and I see how it happens. I mean, I'm frustrated too, but I think we also have to have some compassion and grace that these guys have been through trauma. This isn't working so well for them either. The suicide rate for men, their life expectancy just went down because so many of them are taking their own lives. Like, we have to realize this isn't working for them either. And so when we're talking about all of these things that need to go into our homes and into our workplaces, we also need to recognize that just as much as we need to be vulnerable, they do too. But we all need help in having these tough conversations. And so that's something I want to point out. And I think that's coming up for me right now as I'm listening to all of us. But Nadia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just what's the number one thing that needs to happen in HR? Jamie, what's the number one thing that you think needs to be happening with healthcare? And Nancy, what's the number one thing you think as it relates to so many more individuals in our world with neurodiversity and what needs to change in our workplaces?
I can start. I mean, what comes to mind for me is, I think for women, we possibly fight because we feel like there's only one seat. It's like the worst part of musical chairs, that intrepidation we feel when there's that one chair and there's 8 of us. And who's going to get that chair when the music stops? And so I think that's what it is we feel like that there's this fight that has to happen because there's only room for one or a small few. And so how do we widen that road where all of us can cross over, holding hands and knowing we all deserve the win? And so in HR, I would say we need to abandon this feeling and this thinking that if we pave the way for one person, it's not equitable. And I use this example all the time in my trainings, which is think of a keyboard, think of voice to text, think of an electric toothbrush, think of the OxyGrip like peelers and kitchen gadgets that they now have. Those were all inventions created for someone with a disability. They were not necessarily created for Nancy or Alicia or Jamie, but yet how many of us use that? How many of us on here use any one of those things I just mentioned? So when you carve the way and listen to the need of one individual, unbeknownst to you, you're creating access and opportunity for so many others. And I think that's the conversation I need my HR practitioners to start having. It's okay to sit down, to be present, to be real with someone's struggle and to pave the way for them to have access to something, because you're helping and benefiting so many others that you probably don't know.
Love it. And what a great example of just simply loving your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
That's really powerful. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm just sitting here like relishing in that comment. What do you think, Jamie? What's going on in healthcare? What do we got to do, sis?
Well, I think that the biggest issue is people have to really slow down and learn about the healthcare economic delivery system. I think that most people are willing to just accept how things are done. They're willing to say, this is huge, and it's overwhelming, and there's so many hands in the pot, and it's very complex, and it's beyond the scope of something I can impact. And that's not true. So I think what people really need to do is they need to learn. They need to understand who the payers and the players are. They need to understand the choice we have as consumers. They need to understand the influence they have. And once somebody takes the time to really understand it, they can see transparently where all of the holes are, where the excess exists, and who's actually filling their pockets versus providing care. So my call to action would be get with a broker, get with a consultant, understand what's going on within your own personal health plan or even your organizations. And if you don't have access to somebody with that information, research on your own. But there's really a lot of good knowledge when you start to realize what's going on and how these problems could be solved. So my encouragement would be educate yourself. Don't throw your hands up and say, this topic's too big for me to solve.
They just need to get with you. Let's just say that right now. They just need to get.
I have a couple of opinions, yes.
Yes. You're out here paving the way, just one top 100 innovator in entrepreneurship and healthcare, right? Like, just get with Jamie. Jamie knows what she's doing, the founder of Curated Experience Consulting, and just get this wrapped up right now and get your company moving in the right direction.
We really just need to break down barriers, right? Barriers to access, barriers through financial and capacity issues, and it can be done. So people need to be open-minded and they need to learn.
well, it's like Nadia said, right? We had all of these inventions that just over time that have come forward. And like, we're still operating off Henry Ford's assembly line work week. We're still operating off of an educational system that was designed to get the kids home from school to farm. And so same with our healthcare. We're dealing with a healthcare system that is outdated. It's broken and it needs updated because literally lives are being lost because of this outdated system.
Well, innovation's not happening with the 5 biggest health plans, right? They're pretty content to deliver as is. Everybody's doing really well in the scenario that we have currently today. So I would say be open to alternative solutions as well. There's a lot of good innovation happening on the ground level.
Amen. I love it. And thank God, right? Because there is so much at stake. So much. What do you think, Nancy? What's going on in neurodiversity and introducing people to even what that concept is, what it means, and how it's informing our workplaces moving forward and our homes, quite frankly?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Our brains don't just live at work or just live at home, right? And can we just pause for 1 second? So I know we say neurodiversity, but really what we're talking about is the big 3 that most people hear and know of are autism, dyslexia, and ADHD. So sometimes I almost think I need to like rebrand and not say neurodiversity because it's just like this big fuzzy word that people don't know. But then when I say, oh, you know, somebody with ADHD or dyslexia or autism, they're like, oh yeah, I know that. So it's not as scary as it seems. I think the biggest thing is just education, right? Like I do truly believe that everyone wakes up in the morning and wants to do better. Like I think that we're fundamentally good human beings. We just don't know a lot of things about neurodiversity and how brains work right now. And it's just something that hasn't been talked about. So more education. And really my call to action is just getting curious. Like when you're sitting around the tables, whether it's a kitchen table or a boardroom table, start paying attention to how people think and start celebrating people that think differently than you, because that is exactly what neurodiversity is, right? Like everyone's brain is wired differently, some of us more than others, right? But we're all a little bit different. And when we start to get curious, I mean, there's such a business case for it, right? There's more curiosity leads to creativity and innovation, retention goes up, productivity goes up. Like there's 100 business cases for it. But at the end of the day, just be a good human, right? Like just celebrate each person for their own natural gifts and talents. And really, when you see it, call it out. Like so many times people don't understand their own gifts and talents too, I think. And I know I have had leaders in the past who were like, you're so good at seeing the big picture, being strategic. I had no idea that was tied to dyslexia at the time, but I'm like, oh, I am? I thought everybody saw like I saw a problem. And it wasn't until those leaders or peers, brought that out in me that it kind of started to light that fire. So my call to action is really just get curious about other people and how they think and celebrate it in the process.
I would really invite companies or parents for that matter to just understand the statistics that it's currently 1 in 30 individuals have autism. I believe it's 1 in 10 with ADHD and 1 in 13 with dyslexia. That's me throwing this out without my notes in front of me, but this is here, like today. So if we go to like someday versus today, this is here. And so we actually have way more individuals that are experiencing this level of thinking that could be different from the way that our companies are currently set up, right? Like HR, like healthcare, like we just went through, like things are not the same. And so as corporations, as parents, right, if we're trying to parent one way and it's not working, it's likely because a potential strategy would be needed. And Nancy, that's where you come in and you do a lot of really great coaching for parents, but you also help corporations understand how this all comes together. It was really interesting. My daughter and I were at the grocery store on Saturday in preparation for Easter, and I ran into someone I know, and they have no idea that she has OCD. And so they stuck their hand to shake her hand, and she paused, and I could just tell the level of anxiety that my daughter was experiencing in that moment. And I almost said something, and I let it naturally just play out. And she shook this person's hand, but it completely got her dysregulated the entire grocery trip. And so I share that on this podcast because those are the sorts of things that if you are an owner of a company and you're coming out in 10 years from now to interview my daughter, now, will she have, continued to improve health aspects that her OCD is going to be minimized, disappear, or who knows, get worse, right? But if you're coming out to interview her and you go to shake her hand and she doesn't act confident or she doesn't shake your hand, she has already been labeled. And it really opened my eyes over the weekend watching my daughter go through this experience. She is literally one of the most smart and strategic children I have ever met. Now, granted, I'm her mother, so maybe I'm hyping this up a couple of points extra than I can or should be. But no joke, as well as I should, Nadia. That's right. But this girl is doing amazing things. But man, I had that moment over the weekend, and it made me almost tearful that I'm like, who's going to judge her for this moving forward and immediately discount her for a potential job opportunity? And so I share that story because I want people to understand this is today, and these are the kids, and these are even the adults sitting in your corporations right now that you need to better understand how their brains work so that you're not creating dysregulated work environments, you're not causing trauma, and you're not missing talent that's going to make your company a ton of money.
Yes,
absolutely. And if I can just add one more call to action. So for parents, if you at all are thinking that there's just a gut feeling that something may just be like your child's working hard, but they're just not getting ahead, please, please, please you will be your best advocate for your child. And most of the times a teacher or a school system will not step up and proactively say anything. And I think as parents, we all hope that that's what would happen, but very few times is that what I hear actually happen. So if you at all think that there's, maybe a dyslexia thing going on or an ADHD or whatever it is, take that first step and don't give up. If that's where your gut is, please, your children are depending on you to be that voice for them because they don't have that voice yet. And so I run across a lot of parents that are like, I don't know, I think they just need to try harder. Trust me when I say those kids are trying as hard as they can every day just to keep it together. So that's always my plea with parents is if you think at all that there might be something else going on, just take the right action. Reach out to me or do your own research, but just make sure for their sake that they have.
Like I did. Yeah, like I reached out to you for the very same thing. And yes, it was having the proximity, blessed with the proximity of your voice and your knowledge in this space. And as my husband and I are scratching our heads trying to figure out, why is it my oldest, the way we see at home is not the way he shows up at school. And we're sitting there in this entire huge boardroom style thing with all these teachers and counselors and psychologists. And I really had an out of body experience. Like, none of this makes sense. Like, none of this, I know something is off, even though they ran all these tests and everything for 2 months and said, well, he's proficient in everything and where he's supposed to be. And raised for an each other, like, there is something off. And I love talking to you, Nancy, at lunch that day. And you're like, oh, but here are all the ways, if he has this, here are all the ways he is going to be so amazing in this career. Here are all the ways that he is going to shine because of these skills and natural gifts that he has. And I love that because I went, and I think, Alicia, I spoke to you too, on the brink of those conversations. I went to all the challenges, right? Because in the workplace, we only talk on the negative aspects of it. And Nancy, you reframed it and reimagined it and said, no, those aren't challenges. Here are all the wonderful opportunities now he has. And thankful today, we figured it out, and he's excelling great now at school, and he's now fluent in who he is at home and who he is at school. The teachers are like, we would tell them how witty and funny he is, and they're like, we don't see that. Now they're seeing it. And so, yes, your call to action and your gut check is so right. I encourage other parents to have those conversations because, yes, we are their advocates. We are their champions. And if something isn't right, we owe it to them to be their voices until they're able to have it for themselves.
I love that. I hope we're modeling for those listening or watching. These are the types of intersectional conversations that need to be happening. So this is how this group even got together, right? Jamie is a good friend of mine I've known for years, but as I started talking about healthcare, it was really leaning in with her and understanding her experiences and expertise and her hearing mine. And I know that she's learned some things from me and I've learned some things from her that made both of us think differently. And same with Nancy, right? Like I saw what she was working on with dyslexia and with me launching the JOS district and me sharing with her like, hey, there at times can be health components that are related to this. And then her sharing with me, right, different strategies that exist coming alongside the health stuff. And so again, things are changing so fast. And then of course, Nadia, right, with just some of the health stuff and this neurodivergent reaching out to you with the JOS district. I mean, this is what we need more of. These conversations of just leaning in and being like, hey, share with me what's going on in your world. Here's what's going on in my world. How do they inform each other? And Nadia, again, it just goes back to that really beautiful nugget you said earlier that if I can meet the individual in front of me, if I can meet their need and they need something, like mind blown emoji, that it not only helps the person sitting in front of you, it impacts a family, it impacts colleagues, it impacts a community, it impacts friendships. And like this really is literally one of the best investments we can put out there is helping each other and finding our place in that along the way. And Jamie, I think you have some of the best advice on how we can do that. And it correlates to a conversation that you and I had probably 6 months ago now, but we were talking about friendships and how, you know, as women, we get busy and sometimes we feel intimidated to ask because it's like you've already asked so much that you feel like you can't even pass the salt. So can you, like, I love how you articulated this the other day. And I think it would be a really great way to finalize this podcast episode together.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think the context of that conversation was that I had been through a chapter where I'd been doing a lot of fundraising. And I said I'd put out so many asks at that point that I was afraid to even ask anybody to pass the salt. And you reminded me that we should never be afraid to ask. But I think one of the greatest gifts I ever received in my life was the knowledge and the message that when we lean into our own gifts and talents, that we do better collectively, that we don't have to be all things. So I remember very distinctly, it was actually a sermon, listening to this sermon and having this like really just pivotal moment of going, I'm trying to do it all. I'm trying to be everything. I'm trying to be perfect in all ways. And all of these areas that I'm not great at, I'm beating myself up over. And that's when I decided to put down the spreadsheets and not pretend to be something I was anymore in life. And so I think that asking each other for help does a couple of things, right? One, it collectively makes us better because we are different. We are diverse. We have different brains. We have different natural skills and talents. And so it actually brings insight and it brings power into whatever's trying to be accomplished. But then two, it reminds us that we're community. So when somebody calls you and says, I really need your expertise, guess what that does? That reinforces that confidence piece that we were talking about. Helps you know I bring value and I've got something to add to this conversation. I was with a friend going for a walk, maybe 6 months after leaving my corporate career, and I was sharing with her that I was feeling a little unproductive. I wasn't really sure how I was adding value anymore. I had some clients that I was helping. I really liked the work I was doing, but I just felt like without being hyper productive all the time, maybe I wasn't contributing enough. And she said to me, every time you pick up the phone when a friend calls, every time one of your children needs a little something, some advice, needs you to show up, every time you get to actually be present and listen to what your husband needs after a long day versus half listening, perhaps, like I used to in the past while thinking about my own things, every time you're doing the work. And she said, you're doing the work. So just make sure that you know that all of the work isn't tangible work. And I really believe that when we get together and we lean into each other, we're helping to perpetuate moving forward. We're becoming doers. We've all said this multiple times on this call. You girls are my think tank, right? And vice versa. And I love that because it helps move things forward. So my best advice is don't be afraid to pass the salt. You actually really bless someone when you ask them for help. And collectively, that's how we're going to get things done.
Yeah, and women, and you get to say no. I mean, I think that's the beauty of us using our voices, is like it also gets to come against that line of don't make up, like I can't make up for you that you're going to say no to me. Like oftentimes you're going to say yes, but I've found out at times by even just picking up the phone and asking something that I need, other people have shared with me things they need or things that are going on in their life. And so it goes to what you said, Jamie. It just helps the collective. I hope that makes sense the way I just articulated it. But by using our voice and going after our own need, it essentially ends up just like rippling out from there. And there's so much connection and beauty. And I mean, there's things that I have sat here at my desk and like spent 30 minutes and I'm like, F it, I'm calling Jamie. Like she's gonna answer this in 3 minutes instead of me sitting here for another 30 minutes for a total of an hour. And I pick up the phone and you always take, well, it ends up being 3 minutes on my question and then we talk for another 30 about something else. Sure. But it's always worth, and I know you don't mind doing it, but I think as women, we thought we're weak if we ask for help, but this self-worth and value that we don't have to do this thing out here all by ourselves anymore.
Absolutely.
We don't. So yes, we need to pass the salt. Well, we're coming up on our time, which has went way longer than I thought it would. But of course it would, because we have the four of us together and this is what happens. I would love if we can just recap, I know I've got a ton of takeaways already for myself from this conversation with all of you, but I'd love to hear from each of you. Like, is there just something you want to recap, something you want to leave people with? What do you got?
I would say the conversation is the relationship. And sometimes the relationship we need the most in that moment is the relationship with ourselves. And so what are the things we're saying to ourselves? Are we saying kind, wonderful things like we should be to ourselves? And then extending it out, because we don't know what everyone is dealing with every single day and the challenges we face. And we all have them in different capacities. So enhance those relationships, and it's through those conversations. And don't be afraid to have those conversations, especially in the workplace. They're so needed.
I love it.
Yeah, I think for me, it's be a little bit more selfish, right? We put everybody else's needs ahead of our own, and to the point about, kind of looking in the mirror and saying, like, what do I need? What do I need to show up as the best mom and as the best business owner, as the best family member, and really take that to heart, because that's how we all get better, is if we show up as our best self every day.
Love that.
I would say also, don't be afraid to take those leaps and don't feel like you have to have every box checked to do it. So if that's going to corporate America with a difficult conversation, or if that's branching off on your own, you don't have to have it all figured out. Use your network, use your collective, keep leaning into other smart people, and especially to your sisters.
And pass the salt.
Pass the salt. Don't be afraid to ask for the salt.
Don't be afraid.
It reminds me, I sent some of you a screenshot of a page of a book I was reading over the weekend. Our Easter weekend completely fell apart for a multitude of different reasons, mostly the health issue I was speaking of in regards to a family member. But I sent you a screenshot from the book I was reading. Yes, and it was called The Women of Easter. And regardless of where your religious affiliation is in this, that's not what I'm here to talk about. You can still get what it is that I'm trying to articulate. But I want to leave people with get unbound. And what that meant was Mary of Bethany, when she found herself before Jesus was crucified, she took the bottle of perfume, which was a year's worth of wages, and just poured it over his feet and spread it around with her hair. Now, it sounds so wild, but that's the whole point. it was wild. And you're not, as a woman of that time, supposed to let your hair down in front of men. You know, here was something so lavish that she did, that she got called out for, that should have maybe potentially been donated to charity. What I think it does is it takes everything all three of you just said, right? And so like this, be selfish, or pour yourself out on your needs, or, you know, whatever your purpose is, like align yourself in that place. And so it was called that she was unbound. And like, that just resonated with me. And I just really realized over this past weekend, like, where am I holding back that I won't let my hair down? Where am I holding back that I won't double down on my purpose or my needs? And, you know, then it kind of goes back at the beginning that I opened up with, you know, these are men that are leaving their wives. These are men that are willing to divorce their families all for their career. But again, this is what they've been taught. So I think if anything's going to change, we have to know the foundation, but we have to get unbound if this is really going to change, and we need to know it's okay to do it. And so it just was a really powerful page and message that I read over the weekend, but it made me think of the work all three of you are also doing. And it made me realize how we're going to need each other if we're going to get unbound. And so I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for your friendship. I'm so grateful for the work all three of you are doing. You are women who have changed my life. You know, Jamie, when I was stuck in the house and I got the call that day that you had nominated an award for me, when I couldn't even leave my house and I felt useless because I wasn't able to be out here, you saw in me something during a time that I couldn't see it. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we have to keep doing for each other. And so I'm so grateful for each of you, your time on this podcast, your wisdom, your words. But damn it, most importantly, I am so grateful for your friendship.
Oh, same here.
Yeah,
all of you.
Absolutely.
You're my people.
You are my people.
Thank you for putting this together too. This was special. I think I hope a lot of women this will resonate with them and share that it's a resource too.
Yeah. And letting people know, right? Like while I was stuck in my house, you know, I wasn't able to get out as much, or, you know, I've had my friend group change over the years. Like, you know, if you're feeling like the other side of this is that you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't have that, it's never too late to start. And like you said, Nadia, it just goes back to relationship and just putting yourself out there, and maybe attend some networking events or, you know, some different things going on. But, you know, it's okay to start over, and it's okay to get unbound in a different way than maybe how you were even starting on this call today.
I had a friend reach out to me yesterday. I call her a friend. She's a business associate, but we've gotten to be closer to each other. And she called me yesterday just to bounce ideas. And I felt so honored. And I think that was that unbinding, that saying, okay, I'm going to make myself vulnerable. I'm going to call Jamie. I don't have a purpose for this call except to just kind of talk through some things and brainstorm. And I felt very honored. So remember too that you're blessing the person you're reaching out to when you do allow yourself to just say, I need a little support. And I want to get the best minds in the rooms. I love all of you, and I'm thankful for each of your brains.
Ditto. Well, let's keep reminding ourselves that there's someday and there's today, and we're going to have a different way every day with how we show up and needing what it is that we need, what we want, but we can never forget that we have each other. Thank you, Precision Chiropractic, Jennifer Pansition with Edward Jones, Dutch Maids, the Avalon Foundation, and Chica Creative for believing in better care, better support, and better outcomes for mamas and their families in the real world. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical, health, or nutritional advice.